All right, welcome. IICS 637, Digital Data and Social Media. We have an amazing supplementary video today with my esteemed and brilliant colleague, Neelu Devuti, who is actually coming to us from overseas. We tried to get her in at class time, but there's very important conferencing to be done. And so here's a supplementary video for us. Welcome to class, Neelu. Thank you for joining us. And do you want to introduce yourself and your background to the students today?
Yes, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Neelu Devuti. I am a PhD candidate at the University of British Columbia at the School of Information. I am now entering my fifth year, maybe, of my PhD. I'm definitely in the writing phases. And my dissertation and my PhD work looks at death, dying, and memorialization content on social media. And in particular, my study is focusing on TikTok as a platform for where the presence of this content exists, and also considering not only what that kind of content looks like on TikTok, but also thinking about why we should care about that. Thanks for having me, Jagger. This is so exciting.
I'm very excited that you're here. So, students, we just want to give you a little trigger warning. We are going to be talking about death and dying in this interview. So, if for any reason that is upsetting to you, please feel free to, you could talk to us about it later, or you can just attend the main part of the lecture. That's okay. This is supplementary material, and it's going to be super interesting for those of you who can watch it. But yeah, if you can't for any reason, please take care of yourself first. All right, with that in mind, Neelu, I would love for you to tell the class about the research you're doing.
Yes, so right now I am analyzing 132 TikTok videos that I've been able to collect. And I'm looking at the sort of themes that are showing up. So I've been doing an inductive analysis as well, the deductive analysis. And I'm viewing these videos through Jacobson's spectacular death framework, which there's 5 dimensions of this framework, but essentially he talks about how death has become something in the 20th and 21st century, something that's become a spectacle, essentially. It's been removed from that sequestrinization that we had with, from the 1950s, where death was something that happened in a hospital, but it's taken a new sort of life. And there's 5 dimensions that he considers. One of it is mediatization of death. So how death is being portrayed in the media. So we have here, of course, films and the like. There's also re-ritualization of death. So how we take traditional rituals and then now recontextualize them to fit in our sort of modern contemporary lives. Then, of course, there's a commercialization of death. And one of the more popular examples that Jacobson uses is body worlds, which was a traveling exhibition, essentially, of bodies on display. And, several of these bodies were quote unquote donated. And that's another rabbit hole. But essentially, the artist and the organization behind Body World modified on the exhibition of bodies, either through ticket sales or through also being able to purchase specimen, essentially. So there's also within this dimension, so those are the 3 that I focus on, but there's also discussions of end of life as well and death education, which are also something that's more relevant to the spectacular death frameworks. So within the 3 dimensions of mediatization, re-ritualization, and commodification, I look at the 132 TikTok videos through these lenses. So I view how death is mediatized on the platform. So for instance, how are content creators like funeral home directors, hospice nurses, or just individuals themselves who have lost their loved ones, how do they portray their dead? Am I seeing autopsy reenactment, which is something that comes up a lot through true crime, for example, or depictions of hospital scenes, someone actively dying, that kind of content. I mean that falls into mediatization, re-ritualization. I look at how people film themselves going to grave sites. How are they, you know, conducting these traditional rituals of death, but they're doing it on TikTok. So they're inviting this audience now. It's no longer confined to like community and personal situation. It's now for all the world to see. And then the third thing, which is really at the core of the spectacular death in the context of TikTok, is this commodification. We know TikTok is not a neutral platform. It runs on the attention economy. Content creators, especially those in contexts like the United States and parts of Europe, they benefit from uploading content of their loved ones, or even uploading true current content, and that kind of all kind of stuff. So there's also that element of like, there's money to be made in having engagement. And so I do my analysis of those frameworks, and I'm bringing in from the information science book, because I am an information scientist, so I must bring something from information sciences. I'm viewing all of this through Luciano Floridi's framework. He's an information philosopher, and he thinks through information ethics and dignity. So I'm considering digital dignity in this way. How are we sort of um, exploiting dignity of the deceased on platforms like TikTok? I've seen it already on Facebook, but it's taking a new persona on TikTok specifically. In what ways are the dignity being violated? In what ways can we help to safeguard them? So that's all that in a nutshell.
Oh, I love it. And I have so many questions. So from every little bit of your process, I think I have questions. But let's start with an easy one because I know the students will want to know. They're about to, after this class, embark on their own major research projects. So can you tell them a little bit about how did you collect the TikTok videos? You know, what was your process there? How did you find them? How did you collect them? And how are you making sure, because you were talking ethics here, how are you making sure that you are, ethically taking care of your subjects, as it were?
Yes, that's an excellent question. TikTok feels like the wild, wild west when it comes to methodology and when it comes through with ethics. There are times when I feel like I am researching something whilst walking on quicksand. Like it's just constantly things are falling. Like even the videos that I collected for my thesis from last year, they are so old now. Like those like trends don't even make sense in the context of just like 10 months later. So everything is very fast moving. In terms of methodology, because I am a humanist, I don't come from a social science background. I've had a lot of learning in the process of my PhD to how to what does it even mean to do like a thematic analysis in this kind of context. I've been looking a lot at scholars. I've been looking at especially scholars in media studies who are looking at TikTok specifically. So what I've done in my methodology is essentially drawn from them. What I've done a walkthrough method. What even is this platform? What does it even look like to download it for the first time? What are the terms and conditions? And I lost a lot of my life and a few brain cells trying to read through the terms and conditions of the platform.
Wow.
But that's something to get, that's something to understand. What does it look like, and like random questions too, like what would it look like if I were to die on TikTok? Like, is there a memorialization aspect of the platform that we see maybe on Facebook or Instagram? Um, so it was a lot of like getting used to the platform, and then just drawing upon scholars on how they also are considering the ethicalities of conducting research. And so I had wonderful conversations with my university and thinking through ethics with them. And essentially, what I found is there is a major responsibility on me as a researcher to ensure that, okay, this is public information, this is public, it's out there, whatever, they might not care, but people have a right to privacy. And perhaps they don't expect, nor do they want me blowing up a screenshot of them. And at their worst, because that's a lot of the content that I see, is obviously people at their most vulnerable on like a conference like here in front of like 400, 500 people. And also the fact that I work with dignity really helps me to do a lot of reflecting. So if I had any advice about how to do um, study on TikTok, or just maybe in general on platforms that are so ever changing and so fast paced, do a lot of writing, do a lot of writing and do a lot of reflecting. And I think draw upon the scholarship, draw upon AIR is also another example. Like AIR has really, really good sort of ethical handbook for looking at internet research.
I'm just going
Look
to
at what,
interrupt you for a second
yeah,
because
sorry, I could go
the
on
students
forever.
don't know what AIR is. But they're going to find out because we actually will talk about digital research ethics in a couple of weeks. But everybody, AIR is the Association of Internet Researchers. We call it AIR because the A and the I and the R is capitalized and the O is like a tiny little O. So Association of Internet Researchers. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes. Yes, yes. Great place, great community to look at. And a lot of that scholarship comes from the AIR community as well.
Yes, and so you did a walkthrough method, which is really cool. And maybe I'll invite you back in a couple weeks to demonstrate that because I think the students would be really interested. But from that walkthrough method, you selected 100 and some odd videos. How did you select them? And did
Yeah.
you screen capture them or did you use a tool to bulk download based on a hashtag? What did you do?
Mm. So it was a little bit complicated. Definitely weird things happened, and I don't know, maybe it was a mistake on my part or if it was a little bit quirky. But I actually, my first attempt at collecting my sample was to dummy account. I had a phone, I had VPN, and I had this dummy account, and I started to search using the hashtags for hashtag death, hashtag grief, and hashtag memorialization, or actually RIP. That was what I was going for. And I really, really quickly noticed that um, not only was the content very, very suddenly very dark, as one would expect, but there was also, I wasn't given enough. It was almost like I was either getting thing like content that had zero likes, zero comments, and it was almost like I was put into a position of content moderation. Essentially, the platform was providing this sort of like freshly released sort of content to see if this the kind of content you, because I was getting those messages all the time, like, should this be on TikTok? Should this be on TikTok? So yeah, and it was a lot of content that I didn't find I could really draw upon for my study. So I approached my committee, and the response to that was, let's just go on your personal TikTok. You're seeing this stuff anyways. Let's do it on your personal TikTok, but make sure that you're being really reflexive in the process of this. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned from my methodology is the importance of transparency. And I like that's something that I would love to pass on to the class. Like, be as transparent as possible in how you are navigating your samples, how you're looking at them, how are you collecting them, what are you choosing to exclude and why. So I started with about 190 samples that were relevant, and I collected them, and they were only the ones that I had some barriers for. So they had to be in English. I had to justify that the content creator was not a minor, and they had to be content that was downloadable, which meant that there was an intention for the content creator to have it be shareable, essentially, because TikTok is porous and it can kind of like fly around everywhere. Then I took that sample and 190 videos, and I sat with them and I gave them about 3 months. Then I went back into the samples, and if they were content that was deleted, I would remove it. If it was content that was no longer downloadable, I would remove it. There was obviously decisions being made on the part of the person who was uploading it, and I felt like I had a responsibility to sort of not only put like a bit of a time frame and like where and when, but also just to make sure that 'cause not everybody has that digital literacy about, you can toggle on and off like downloadable content, right? So just to make sure that I was being a bit aware at least of that. And so that's how I got to 132 actually, TikTok videos. And then I just went in with a full content analysis was the first stage, just making sure I had transcription of videos that had narratives, and then collecting all the hashtags. And I was also looking at the comment section too. So also finding comments that had, maybe hundreds and thousands of likes, or they were responded to by the content creator, that sort of stuff.
Wow, that's so good, and I think you could maybe contribute to the AIR research ethics document, given what you've been through and the approaches you've taken. I think it's a lesson to all of us. So thank you for that. Now I want to get into maybe some deeper questions. So we're talking about online memorialization, and this week in class we're learning about the way digital technologies interact with our memories.
Mhm.
Now, we've already used the Internet Archive in class to discuss how some things are kept and archived and other things aren't. And we've talked about the way, the Trump presidency is currently going after the Internet Archive.
Mhm.
Maybe we don't want these things to be archived. But it strikes me that memory on digital tools is very fragile, right? Because it could be gone at any time. What do you see as the tension, right, between this, desire and this very human need to memorialize someone that we were close to who is now gone, and then the fact that these technologies can be very ethereal and at the whims of the owners of the technology, who, as you say, are trying to make a profit at the end of the day.
Yes, excellent question. I can talk about this forever, but all of it to say that there is and has always been a visceral human need to commemorate our loved ones. And we can go as far back, I don't want to start the essay with from the beginning of time, but essentially from the beginning of time, we have been finding ways of um, bringing the dead with us. Carl Ullman has an incredible book called The Afterlife of Your Data, and he begins the book essentially starts with the story of the like early prehistoric people who would actually decapitate their loved ones and carry their heads with them wherever they went because they were nomadic, and they would have them in their homes, and they would have them on display. And so it was a very like against death, and like a very like literally like face to face with death at all times sort of um way of doing it. And then, of course, we can go all the way down centuries later to thinking about the Victorian spiritualists and their desires to connect with the deceased through spiritualist movements, whether it's through seances or with even the introduction of the telephone, the television, all of that. Technology has always been the medium of the dead. It has always been a way for us to connect with and to memorialize. So, of course, it's not unnatural for for platforms now to come in and be a place where memorialization of our loved ones and as memory keepers of them, that's going to be their role naturally. The problem is they were not built for that. They were never built for that. They've only ever been appropriated. And here I am specifically thinking about Facebook. Facebook was never a place for the dead. It has always been, was always a place, at the beginning anyway, for university students to connect with one another, to, we know the dark history. I don't need to get into the dark history of Facebook, but it was a way for them to connect with one another. So when a major event like the Virginia Tech massacre happened, there was no policies in place for what to do with dead college students because dead college students don't die. That was essentially like this idea, right? So Facebook was deleting. They were deleting the profiles of the deceased, and it was up to the families to, approach the platform and say, no, don't do that. Bring them back. And so they did. But the thing with a platform like Facebook is every one dead individual is connected to the web of 200 minimum connections of Facebook. And Facebook is first and foremost a marketing platform. And that is essentially what it does. And I'm going to give like a really quick example here of just because I've been talking about it here at this conference as well. And I think it's a really, really important example that we're not talking about enough. But in the Canadian context, if we're familiar with in the case of Rtea Parsons, who lost her life to suicide after horrific events that happened to her at a party when images and footage of the event was uploaded and shared on social media. And of course, her family wanted a way of commemorating her, and they did that through Facebook. And they started like a rest in peace, Virginia Parsons Facebook memorialization page for her. 2 months after that page went up, her father was on Facebook scrolling, and he gets an ad for find local singles. And it's images of her scraped from, yes, scraped from her memorial page. And even when Facebook was confronted with that, the basically the extent of what they felt that they were responsible for doing was to take down the dating advertising company. But that same advertising company had 8 other branches that were on Facebook. So there's also this notion of agency laundering, and that's a term that we use in information sciences for this like this rhetoric of like, oh, well, it's the algorithm, it's something going on with the platform. Like it's not you we're underhating the faceless, nameless corporations behind these platforms is essentially, and their role in um, eroding the dignity of our loved ones on these digital spaces. And I think the worst thing about all of this is that it's the responsibility and onus is put on the families to be the ones to go and confront these massive corporations, take them to court, and try to fight for the dignity of their dead. And things need to change, essentially. And it's horrific.
Yeah, yeah, that is, I'd never heard that story before. That is
Mm,
chilling. Yeah,
yeah.
so I guess what I was thinking about when you were talking is that dead people don't buy products, but it looks
Yeah.
like they're trying to use dead people to sell products, which I mean, accidental or no, it's still horrific. And
Mm,
I had not heard yet the term agency laundering, and I love it, and I'm going to use it. So to break it down for the class, agency is whether you have the ability, right, to make choices and do things for yourself. And so we are, by blaming the algorithms, we're taking the agency away from the people who program that algorithm and the people who
yeah.
pay the people who program the algorithm. So the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, for example, who
Yeah.
get to decide whether their algorithms will or will not do that, and who, when challenged, decide whether to make the algorithm work differently or not. So, yeah, it's important to remember that algorithms aren't these mystical things. They are
Mm,
instructions that are programmed by people, and so people can
mm,
choose to have an algorithm be vulnerable to accidents like that or to not. And so, yeah, that I think is really important. What do you think, Nilu, what do you think it's doing to
mm,
how we remember? Maybe it's, the people that were closest
mm,
to us, or maybe it's just, even events that happened in the past. What do you think, all of these dynamics
mm,
are doing to
mm.
our memories?
That's a really great question. And I think it's happening. The way that I see it is it's a spectrum of happenings. So there was actually a panel discussion today that the very last written obituary in a small town in Turkey, the very last written obituary was in 2010. There's no longer written obituaries. That's now something that's completely digital because it's free, because it's easy to share, because it's more accessible. So there's that sort of there's a sense that like, okay, well, these digital platforms and these spaces, they help community of mourners come together. They help us share information. I mean, that's the whole thing with like when it comes to death, we want to know what happened because, of course, sharing information about a death helps us live. As that's just something that we do, right? And so and to memorialize deceased people means that their lives matter. And somehow there's this idea that when they're on these digital spaces too, they exist. There's a really good article. Can't remember the name of the authors, but it's called "There's No Wi-Fi in Heaven." And essentially they did an interview with some participants, and people were finding themselves still messaging loved ones on Facebook because there was this sort of sense that they still had this presence. They still had that sort of presence. So there's this idea that in terms of memory and the distance down this side of the spectrum, they still kind of exist. But of course, we can get into discussions of what that does to prolonged grief processes and how disruptive it is to natural grief processes. But what I'm looking at right now that I think is on like the further end of the spectrum that is very concerning is the rise of AI generated content and the dead. And I think if there was any one thing that's starting to erode at a Herculean sort of like speed and attempt is AI generated content. And it shows up on TikTok as harmless. You see it as point of view or POV, you're a medieval peasant that wakes up in the middle of the Black Plague, or POV, you're a passenger on the Titanic. It seems harmless enough, but as we know, AI, algorithms, TikToks, none of this is neutral. None of this is neutral stuff. And I'm wondering myself too, is how easily they could be used to manipulate memory, uh, collective memory surrounding events, surrounding public tragedies, essentially rewriting the deaths of others in that kind of way. So there's this whole like spectrum happening. And I think it happens all together and it happens all at once. So sometimes it's really hard to sort of navigate. Are we looking at individuals? Are we looking at, you know, on historical figures? And then of course we have the comment sections where people are also inserting micro narratives into the discussions.
I that made me think about COVID and how
Mhm.
during COVID it was all really scary, and we knew people who were getting sick, and some people knew people close to them who were dying, and now the memory around that has been changed. Oh, we did too much with the lockdowns and everything else, and we forget what that was like. And I mean, it's not all due to digital technologies. There's some political forces there as well, although we know that digital technology and politics intersect.
Absolutely.
But I guess I want to leave us all with some hope. So I'm going to ask you, Nilu, what can we each do in our own lives to
Mm,
hold on to those precious memories, whether they're loved ones who have passed, or whether it's just the memory of COVID and what we went through, or whether it's even a good memory, maybe. How
yes.
can we fight back against these forces that are trying to influence how we remember all of these important things,
Mm,
and how do we
such
make
a
sure
good
that
question.
we maintain our agency over our
Yes,
memory?
yes. That's such a good question, Vegas. Thank you. And if it's okay, I will give a very humanistic response to this, a little bit, not so much as like an academic, but really coming from a humanistic point of view. I think first and foremost, let's not lose our humanity. Um, let's not fall into these discussions of us versus them when it comes especially to platforms and death. We need to talk about death more because we are leaving behind enormous amounts of digital remains. We now have generations of children who are, there's pictures of them, sonograms of them uploaded onto Instagram. Before they're even out in the world, they have Gmail accounts and Instagram profiles made for them, you know, lovingly by parents, of course, who want to document their journeys. But we really need to talk about what to do with all of these digital remains. And this is a hill that I will die on, but I really encourage everyone to find time to speak to family members in particular. Hey, what would you like to do with your Facebook profile? Facebook profiles are not easy to memorialize. They are not easy. There are cases of individuals being asked by the platform to upload autopsy reports or medical examiner reports because a death certificate does not suffice. So these, yes, and that's the problem with these platforms is again, they are they're made for one thing, but they have been appropriated into something completely different. And the responsibility does fall on us to have that literacy and to use our agency and to remember and never forget that if the product is free, then the product is the. So, be a little bit
Yes.
intentional, a little bit more intentional in how we navigate these platforms and what we're deciding to use and upload and to talk about it. Let's not shy away about our fears, about our hopes and yeah, let's keep the discussions going because we need that. We can't all retreat into our little like spaces and places.
Oh, that's so powerful. So I'm going to ask anybody who's chosen to watch this video today. I want you maybe to reflect for us in our Discord. You can put it in the supplementary materials discussion. It doesn't have to be about death, but what do you think social media is doing to the way you remember things? So maybe give us a little discussion of that. Neela, thank you so much for joining us. I could talk to you all day.
Thank
This is such a
you.
rich discussion. And I'm pretty sure the students will have questions. So if we do have any questions, can I collect them and send them your way?
Absolutely. I love yapping about this stuff. So send them all my way.
Rad. So enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you for taking the time with
Thank
us today.
you. Thank you very